Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming back to the show the person who should practically be the third member of this podcast, Capy.
Hallelujah! I'm back again for yet another episode of Thicc Radio. I am the Captain Bara, also known as Capy, and I'm glad to be here reviewing this precious and unique cinematic oeuvre with you all today.
You know, we are very much an olive branch group. You know, the door is always open. The invitation is not time locked. There is no expiry date. You are always welcome to come and join us if you change your mind. But speaking of changed minds, I kind of wish I changed my mind about watching this film. God damn. I mean, listen, I think we've actually, I was saying this before, I think what we failed to recognize in having, like, we reviewed, you know, my little documentary that I was a part of. We reviewed, you know, things like Hard Fat in the past. We reviewed Feed Me, which actually wasn't too bad. And so I think having had nothing but shit beforehand and then having some good shit maybe set us up for failure there, because we're right back to things being not that crash hot. But you know what? Cap, we've decided to make you suffer through this bullshit with us. So listen, bitch, are you ready to just get into this?
As you like to say, let's talk about it.
Yes, let's talk about it indeed. And you know, we'll say here at the top of the episode, one of the reasons we did ask you is because the film Gordos, known as Fat People in English, is a Spanish-made film, which there are almost no versions where there is any kind of English dub. It is mostly just English subtitles. So we invited you to watch alongside us to basically interpret if there was any secret goings-on in the Spanish lingua that we would absolutely miss. So I suppose the first port of call is telling you all a little bit about this fucking film. So it's called Gordos. It was directed by Daniel Sánchez Arévalo.
Daniel Sánchez Arévalo. Yeah.
Daniel Sánchez Arévalo. Directed by that dude. And basically it is about these five main characters. You have Enrique, Sofia, Andres, Leonor, and Abel. The first four are all fatties attending this therapy group. Abel is the man who runs the shindig. And the film is meant to explore their lives and, you know, primarily the reasons why they're fat, but then also the sort of not so secret subversive reasons about why they're fat and the sort of goings on and all of those things. So basically this film, we're just going to let you all know, is something. So what we're gonna do is basically kind of run you all through the plot and then give our thoughts and feedback as the plot progresses. So look, kicking it off, the first person is Enrique, and Enrique is actually a weight loss success who's endorsing a product called Kilo Away, and it's doing it in like that, you know, 90s shopping network style type of thing. But it is revealed in the film that through the stress of trying to maintain his weight for the contract, he ends up regaining all of the weight. As a result, he loses his contract, and now has some real anger issues, apparently relating to the poor treatment he's received by others.
And then we circle over to Sophia, who has been a big girl all of her life and struggles to resist having sex with her fiance, Alex. They are both devout Catholics and navigate their desires by quoting scripture at each other. And it's really funny the way they kind of like shoot them at each other. He's like, no, I need to be pure. And she's like, I need to give my body as a living sacrifice. So it's quite amusing the ways in which they actually wound up using scripture to bolster their individual opinions. That was actually one of the smarter things in the film, I will say. And it made me laugh every single time they used it. So, you know, for as problematic as the film is, props to our friend, the director. And then we circle over to Andres, who is a large man who comes from a family of large people. In one scene, he shows photos of various men in his family explaining how they all ate and lived in pleasure, but all died just before the age of 50. He himself is 49 and determined to defy these expectations of death.
So for a very brief moment, looking in at the Catholicism included in the film, we've actually done a couple of episodes now talking a little bit about obesity and spirituality and religion, and it's very interesting seeing scripture being used in this format, I must say, especially because we had some fat bitches on the pod who are people of faith, and I would not say that this would be a part of their personal, spiritual, sexual dynamics.
I didn't know any Catholics like this.
No,
I've known more Protestants to be like that, honestly.
Yeah, I was just about to say that because like when I was in Catholic school and like all those years of doing catechumenic classes and shit like that, I feel as if the basic understanding was you can do whatever the hell you want so long as you cross yourself first so you go to the priest on Sunday.
Tim, that explains so much about you, my love.
I know.
but no, that was a very interesting element. But at least Andre's narrative makes sense. He's like, I am fat, everyone in my family is fat, they all died around this age, I don't want to die, let's do something about that.
So then they introduce us to a character named Lenore. She's an engineer who works from home, and I couldn't figure out at first if this woman was promiscuous or bipolar or possibly just a bitch. But she's had this boyfriend, German, for like 12 years, and he's taken this job in Los Angeles. And since he's been away in LA, she's been putting on weight, and she's like paranoid that when he comes back, he's not going to be attracted to her anymore because he has, I guess, this history of like disliking fat people. And so she's convinced that he's going to break up with her. And then finally, we're introduced to Abel and his wife Paula. So Abel is like a skinny guy who runs this support group. And I don't know if it was ever revealed. Now, was it ever revealed that he was chubby when he was young? I guess he must have been to be leading this group. He must have been chubby at one point. And his wife Paula is pregnant. And so, obviously she's going to start gaining weight because what pregnant woman doesn't? And all of a sudden he's like struggling to find her sexy and he doesn't want to look at her. And like, it's so bizarre.
So we get to see a little bit of Andre's life, so there's him and his wife Beatriz. They are both very fat, and they have two children, Nuria, their daughter, and their son Louise, who are fraternal twins. Nuria is a big girl, Louise is skinty, and he never not bullies Nuria about her weight.
Shit.
Like, it is constant, it is horrible. It is the kind of shit I would have punched a motherfucker in the face for because, my God. And there is a moment where you see Andres and Beatrice having fat fucking, which is actually... okay, let me ask you all this. Because, like, outside of Survival of the Thickest, I have never seen a simultaneous two people being fat having a sex scene together in any kind of non-pornographic representative media. Like, have you guys got much of a reference point for that in America?
No, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, one thing that was not jarring, but that stood out, I suppose, is it's very clearly a European film in the way they handle bodies and nudity, and sex.
Oh,
quite frankly, it's very kind of balls out. Pardon the metaphor, or pardon the. What is that, a pun?
The double entendre.
Yes, double entendre not intended, but I guess welcome.
I liked it. I mean, and look, if you all, for whatever reason, go and find this film, you will see pole and hole, titties and ass, and all of it. And look, for the brief moment that you see it, like, there is a sort of, like, I felt joyful seeing two genuinely fat people having what was clearly represented to be like passionate sex. Not like kind of like whimpering. They were both like going for hog and moaning and everything. So like good on them. But then, of course, it is ruined because Luis, the skinty little brat kid, is like recording them for some reason and is trying to like upload this shit to the internet, which he doesn't succeed at.
Look, you can say all you want about a European film, but that's still weird. Filming your own parents having sex.
This
Yeah,
kind of goes back to like this also dates the film, I feel like. It's like in media, they don't quite know how to like where to draw the line with certain themes of voyeurism and filming. Kind of reminds me of like in Lizzie McGuire, where the brat kid brother is like driving the remote control car with a camera into his sister's room. Like nowadays, if you were to upload that, that's like a felony. You're like posting, potentially nude video of someone without their consent. Like it's a problem in this day and age, and I'd imagine back then too. But it shows when the film was made, clearly.
right. And even like the quality of the video, it gives very much that like a 90s homemade film vibe. Like it was very that. It was very that. Um, After this scene, you've got Enrique who invites an escort to his place. We find out he's gay. Um, and you realize like there's a consistent reference to the need for money because he's having to pay for sex. Um, and because of this broken contract situation, he's being sued by his romantic partner, who is named Jesus.
Hey, Sue, moving on from that, we go back to Sophia. She talks about how she used to sell perfume in the mall, but no one would notice her. In fact, they would ignore her, probably because she was fat. So she moves to a call center job, which she explains is why she gained the weight. Or further gained weight, I should say. She felt unconfident and was worried about impressing her partner Alex, whom she laments, never touches her. Uh, and of course, he says that it's because he's trying to save it for marriage. Then we move over back to Andres, the big father, and he's a coroner, and he's investigating a scene at a restaurant that he
Oh yeah.
wanted to dine at. And as he is at this crime scene, looking at the evidence, he noticed that he found the engagement ring that the deceased man choked on, which he later threw up. Interestingly, when Andres, the coroner, finds the ring, he licks it clean to read the inscription on it, which all of us immediately found very problematic. This was a very clear moment of the director's bias or point of view. It seemed to suggest that fat people have no impulse control, such that in a professional working situation, they wouldn't hesitate to lick this ring that has been inside someone's body just so he could taste.
That was covered in saliva and bile and
Yeah,
bacteria and Christ only knows what else. That's just nasty. It's not just that it's unprofessional, it's disgusting.
right. And the idea presumably is that he did so that he could taste the oysters and the wine, which is horrifying, frankly, and once again, not really realistic. Like, I'm
Yeah.
quite certain most rational humans would find that disgusting.
Anyway, after all that bullshit, um, we get a little bit of a closer look at Andre's family. And like during one of the sessions that they're having, because they keep cutting back to these like round table sessions that they have with this group therapy, it's implied that Andres gives out food to other people to like fatten them up so that he feels less fat himself. Or is like whenever he's having negative feelings, like this is his way of coping, is to like share his food so that other people will get fat along with him or possibly get fatter than he is. And then like we get to see that he and his wife are just like so wrapped up in each other. Like they seem to have this very like fiery, tempestuous, like sexual relationship with each other, obviously, because just minutes before they had been filmed having sex, but they're like feeding each other at the table and they're completely ignoring their two children. And like Luis is sitting there talking total shit to Nuria. The only thing that they say about it is like, don't be rude, or, and then the mom says, you're very intolerable today, which I thought was one of the best lines I'd ever heard. Um, then we go back to Alex and Sophia. This is like the uber religious couple. And Alex like kind of implies that he wants Sophia to be on the chubbier side. But then, you know, he is they like cut to this scene where he's a repair guy that works in a strip club. I mean, and so he gets to look at the models all the time, and like, you know, there's women walking around him constantly in very skimpy outfits and stuff like that. But it's like we're led to believe that it's his like religious convictions that keep him very much in line, and that he's not going to look, or he's not going to be tempted, and seems very sexually repressed. And it kind of like leads to these very controlling and manipulative behaviors with his girlfriend, you know, and she keeps pushing for sex without she feels that she doesn't need condoms, because she's like saying to him, like, you know, we can do this, we can have sex, and no one's going to notice if I get pregnant because I'm already fat.
I mean, what do you all think of that element of Alex's sexual repression and the kind of use of that? Because, in my opinion, yes, he probably had some amount of work to be done in unpacking that, but the way it manifested in his relationship with Sophia was to be manipulative of her. You know, at first it's demanding that she loses weight, and now it's to regain the weight. And in all of this, I feel like that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to, because he's not in control of his own feelings, so he's trying to control the one thing that he thinks will help him to maintain himself, which is Sophia.
Well, you know, and they do start having sex at one point because she talks him into finally doing it, right? And I feel like he ends up with this Madonna whore complex when it comes to her, right? Like when she's chubby, she's the Madonna. She's the perfect, submissive, oh, this is going to work out great. But the minute that she gains some self-confidence, dresses not provocatively, but a little bit more, like she's exposing more skin. She's like exposing her décolletage. She's feeling good about herself. And all of a sudden he starts treating her like she's like she's a floozy, you know, and accusing other men of looking at her and all this other shit. I'm like, you can't have it both ways, dude.
Yeah, there's a lot of projection of his own insecurities, but also his own hypocrisies. Because at one point, while he is working at the strip club, he does in fact look at one of the girls and tries to talk to her. But thankfully, she can't even hear him trying to get her attention. So
Interesting character, to say the least. Um, After this, you know, we cycle back to Enrique, and he goes on a jog, and he sees his ex, Jesus, who's sitting on a park bench. And they have a brief tete-a-tete, which is not a positive one. And then Jesus says he's gonna sell their penthouse. And then Enrique becomes very angry and pushes him off the bench, which actually puts him in a coma. That resulting anxiety causes him to have an angina attack, and then both of them are taken to the hospital. It then cuts to Leonore, who she begins to acknowledge that she wants German to break up with her, because she's fallen out of love with him. And what she admits to is that she gained weight on purpose to make him break up with her, because she didn't want to be with him. She's relying on this history of hating fat people.
in this instance, it seems to be a very clear case of self-sabotage. And
Yeah.
in a moment of clarity, she realizes, oh, I did this so he would break up with me.
I don't know that there's a scene where, and again, because they edited this film in a strange way and they were splicing things together in weird ways, they keep cutting back to this scene where they're both on her bed and she just keeps screaming at him, dump me, dump me, dump me. And I'm like, girl, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you doing this?
And we later find out, of course, that it's because Germán is the only man she's ever been with. And so she's curious. She wants to sample other men. And she later does. Anyway, moving forward, also, if this explanation of the plot seems all over the place, it's because that's how the film was cut. It's so hard to keep things straight, not only because of the fragmented nature of the storytelling, but also because there's constant jumping between the future, the past, and the what's ostensibly the present. It's very hard to follow. So we thank you for following with us. So moving on, Pilar, who is Jesus's wife, who we only find this out like immediately when she shows up. There's no explanation of this. So apparently Jesus breaks up with Enrique and marries Pilar at some point. And she shows up at the hospital insisting that she'll help take care of Enrique, seemingly as a way to process Jesus being in a coma. And she begins to develop strong feelings and sexual desires for Enrique and pursues sex with him very coercively at that. To which, yeah, he kind of caves and starts to question his sexuality. Then moving forward after this scene, Nuria, the high school girl, fat girl, has a crush on a chubby guy in her school, Samuel. And they go to a discotheque together, but it's revealed that her brother was playing a prank to kind of make her think that she was being, that Samuel was courting her, only to realize that as she gets to the center of the dance floor, people dump drinks on her, and her piece of shit brother is filming this the entire time. Kind of like a Carrie in a sense. It feels like a cheap copy of that trope of like, oh, here's the pig's blood.
Yeah, okay. This is the point in the film where I knew things were fucked, but I'm starting to get like a real I'm getting like red flags are popping up everywhere. Like I don't care that this was filmed in 2009. I don't care that, yes, the world has moved on and we know that gay is okay and all of these narratives that we now take for granted that weren't the case at a certain point in time. I understand all of that. How the fuck ever a scenario in which Jesus is in a coma, his wife is trauma dumping on, his ex-lover, who apparently she and Enrique would sleep together back at college, so like they all fucking knew each other, and it is never quite explained how that dynamic breaks down, y'all, just to be clear. And then like the coercion of this, and then, Enrique starts to capitulate and be like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll let you suck me off. Oh, and it all feels the same when you close your eyes. No, it fucking does. Don't, girl,
Well,
no.
I'm sorry, but when she was introduced, I was like, this woman is completely crazy. There's no way.
Yeah, she comes out of nowhere, no background knowledge, and immediately wants to jump this gay guy's bones. Yeah, this is where you kind of see the seams tearing in the writing. It's not it's problematic to say the least. We'll revisit these issues, however. Let's keep on recapping for our listeners here.
Uh,
Well, if you're still following along, it cuts back to Paula. Now, Paula is the pregnant woman who's having the problems with her husband. Her husband is the guy who runs the therapy group, right? Okay. So Nuria, the chubby girl, the teenage girl, the one that was just had the prank pulled on her. Paula was Nuria's PE teacher until Paula got too far along in her pregnancy to continue teaching. So Nuria shows up at her PE teacher's home and like is knocking on the door, and her husband answers the door, and Nuria's like, I want to talk to the fat lady. And so somehow they strike up this bizarre friendship where they start like socializing with each other. And
And
um
it was in part because she was the only teacher who showed Nuria any kindness,
yeah, any kind of like just basic common respect, right? So
mm,
like the PE teacher is willing to take on Nuria as a tutor, and she's kind of helping her with school. And they're like, every time Nuria comes over, she brings food with her. She brings like pizza, or she brings ice cream or donuts, or whatever. And Paula, the PE teacher, is like trying to gently scold her and like stop her from eating all this junk all the time. But then finally, I guess her resistance breaks down. I mean, and she's pregnant, for Christ's sake. I mean, they get cravings. So she breaks down, she starts eating some of the pizza and the ice cream, but like not excessively. And then before you know it, she goes to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, by the way, you have gestational diabetes." And and then she blames the teenager. She's like, "Well, I can't hang out with her no more. She keeps bringing me all this fattening food and now I've got diabetes." This was ridiculous.
oh no, because it wasn't her that blamed the teenager. It was her man,
Oh,
Abel.
it was her husband. That's right. Her husband blamed the teenager. He's like, yeah, because I remember there was a point where he was like, have you, like, has anything changed in your life? And she's like, well, I've just been hanging out with Nuria and tutoring her all that. And yeah, so then he blames the teenager for his wife getting gestational diabetes.
Because clearly fatness is a communicable disease that you can get
Yeah, it's not like being on your
out.
period. It's not like they didn't sync up or anything. Like it was
Which,
No, fatness is it's contagious.
but does that also hint at perhaps, the director? Okay, so first of all, the director doesn't understand how fatness works. Has never talked to a fat person before, so none of this makes sense. He's never talked to a fag because he doesn't know how being gay works. And so this moment here, does this suggest that he's also never talked to a woman because he doesn't understand like the heterosexist argument of like you just sync up with her and now you're fat because of her? Which let's remember here, this guy Abel is the one running the fucking counseling group that her dad Chungus Andres is going to. So it's just like motherfuckers out here trying to tell people like you just gotta have willpower and you've got to understand why you got fat. Motherfuckers out here like fucking straight up blaming teenagers for like every woe in his life.
I will
Yeah,
say this. I will say the only example I've ever seen of fat via osmosis is in fiction.
yeah, exactly. It's a fictional issue.
Well, oh, and like Tim, you because we talked about this at the time, like we paused it, and you were like, "That's not even how gestational diabetes works. Like it's
I mean,
genetic."
yeah, like so if you're predisposed to having it, like if any members of your family had it, like if you're and it can skip generations sometimes. So like it doesn't necessarily have to be that your mom had it, your grandmother could have had it, or one of your aunts could have had it. And that already sets up a familial predisposition to it. And so it's more like they just discover that it is beginning to develop as the pregnancy is going along. It's not just from eating a bunch of junk. Now, obviously, that's not going to help matters, but I don't think that there is any truth in just like a week's worth of eating a little bit of junk food is going to throw you into gestational diabetes.
Also, for as much as the filmmaker seems to want to depict his subjects as human and flawed, this therapist really should know better. Uh, given how, many of us have experienced therapy and mental health counseling since, there's like a lot more ethics and a lot more, mm, let's just say, the point of what I'm getting at is his depiction of this therapist almost seems to lack a knowledge of like how a therapist would approach many of these situations.
I mean, doesn't know that a coroner wouldn't lick the object inside of like the deceased. Yeah, just a lot of I don't know, throwing shit at the wall and just kind of, I don't know, I think it's like they'll believe this because fat almost feels like this is like that's the point.
Yeah,
And
the film almost requires you to have too much suspension of disbelief. But the fact of the matter is none of it's believable, frankly. Anyway, continuing to this fragmented plot.
Well, in one of the only scenes that actually made me feel good about something, and okay, I know it's going to sound petty, but the little shit had it coming. But so Nuria, who has the shitty brother that's always picking on her, she decides to get the ultimate revenge by so they're twins and it was their birthday, and their father gave to the boy this DNA sequencing kit, which I didn't really think was even something that you could easily get your hands on, but apparently because he's a coroner, he's got access to this stuff. So it was like this machine that he fixed, and he's like, oh, now you can do DNA sequencing. And he gives the daughter, Nuria, he gives her these like electrodes to put on herself while she's working out to like stimulate the problem areas. And Nuri's been putting up with so much shit from her brother that she actually uses that gene sequencer to prove that not only, I mean, they knew that they were fraternal twins, but it actually turns out that they're not related, which leads to, at first, Nuri is just like, oh, it can't possibly be true. You're my twin, yada yada. But the brother actually figures out on his own that they are fraternal twins because they have two separate fathers. Because, and this James, you asked me about this, and this is possible. It's not very common, but it has happened before. where if a woman gets pregnant by one man, and then I think it's within 48 hours, if she sleeps with another man, and there were two eggs in the womb, then they will be fertilized by two different fathers. So it turns out she is not related to her brother. They share the mom, but not the father.
Yeah, it's like they're half siblings.
Yeah.
Which that was a gag to find out. But also like then they tried to put that back on Nuria. And I'm sat here like, can girl, like, give the fat bitch a break. Like, if she dropped her brother from the second story building, he accidentally woke up paraplegic, I would truly be sat there like, she did what needed to be done. You know, she was a woman on the edge.
Yeah, and it's all quite convenient too that this plot point happens because the dad happens to be a coroner and happens to give the kids this gene sequencing machine. In literary analysis, we call this Deus ex machina, or the writer heavy-handedly equipping the subjects of the story with technology that will help advance the plot in the direction that the writer wants it to go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like I call it Chekhov's gun. You know, once the gun's been introduced, it has to be fired. Once this DNA sequencer has been introduced, it's going to have to be used.
Pardon the potential pun again, but it's a rather heavy-handed storytelling.
Kicking on with this plot, um, so Enrique, who's hooking up with Pilar, he pukes every time they hook up, and he goes on with something where it's like, oh, you know, this is a sensual routine that I'm falling, finding myself in. This is why I'm losing the weight. Maybe I'm purging my system of all the things that are wrong with it. Maybe I was always meant to be with a woman, and that's a that's a that's a storyline that they put in this film. Um, then you jump to Paula, who discovers that Abel has been throwing out her food. And so, because Enrique is telling all the guys this in a session about the puking, like they're in the counseling hall. And then, even though Paula is in their home, somehow she gets in the elevator in their home and goes up and directly steps out into the meeting that's taking place. So, like, I don't know how Spanish architecture works, y'all. I don't know if this is some, like, modern how this shit works. But she walks out into the middle of the session and then just has it out with him about this. And then, like, just after that, they're in their home and she's pushing him, and then he breaks down and he's like screaming and like kicking the furniture. He's like, yes, that's right, I can't stand the sight of you, I'm disgusted by you. And it's just like, it's a plot that was included in this film, and then it happened.
Alex then apologizes to Sophia, this is the pious couple, for making her feel insecure about her body, but tells her that he expects her to regain the weight so that everything goes back to normal the way it was before they started having premarital sex. This causes Sophia to get understandably mad. She stands up to him and kicks him out of their apartment. We then pan over to Leonor, who re-enters the storyline after a long departure, telling the therapist Abel about what she's been up to. So Herman didn't want to break up with her, despite her constant pleading, break up with me, break up with me. Then they did break up. Did they break up? And then they got back together. It's
Well,
hard
they
to.
did, because he was at the
We
airport.
just
Like,
watched.
they broke up, and then they went to the airport because he was going to go back to LA. And then she was like, "But I realized in that moment I didn't want him to go, and so I brought him back home, and we got back together." And then immediately that same night, she was like, "And now I regret this again."
Yeah, at which point she goes and sleeps with a total of 20 different men, all of which were happily married, which she enjoyed because she didn't have to deal with rejection. And she didn't really even see it as cheating ultimately because they have their own entanglements. So it really, she saw it as permissible morally in her eyes. She and Abel, the therapist, then go and have sex, which boundaries, isn't there like a, therapist client? No, none of that didn't exist before 2010, evidently, in Spain at least. So yeah, she has sex with the therapist at the very same time while the therapist, Abel's wife, her water breaks and she goes into labor. And when Abel finally finishes, when they finish with each other, the therapist visits his wife in the hospital and she immediately kicks him out. It's not clear, but it seems that she knew something was up.
Then we go back to Sophia. Remember, she's the one with the super religious boyfriend. So she ends up returning the engagement ring to him. She's just had it. She's done with him. She sets it down in front of it. So he's kneeling at like in the pews at church, and he's just feverishly praying. I'm assuming for her to come back. And she sets the engagement ring down, and he's screaming like, "No, don't go, don't go." And then I guess we jump to the future because this part was a little bit confusing for me, where where like her religious boyfriend Alex has gone off to Africa on missionary work, and she's maintained the weight loss while he was gone. But then she decided to gain it back because she's like, "No, I was happier when I was chubby." And for a minute, I was like, "Okay, good for you, girl. Like you got it figured out." But then Abel shows up to talk to her, which I'm still not clear why he just showed up randomly. But they start talking, and then she reveals, like 10 seconds after she had said, "Oh, I was happier being chubby." No, it's all a lie. I'm actually not happy being chubby. I'm miserable, and she only gained the weight back because she wanted to conceal the fact that Alex got her pregnant from one of these times that they had unprotected sex. So I mean, this story's a fucking mess. But then get this shit. Enrique returns to therapy, right? And he's talking to everybody, and he's told them that he's agreed to marry this insane woman, Pilar. And they haven't quite gotten married yet, but they're at least living together by this point. And then they have this fight where, he's like, "I don't really love you, Pilar. I never loved you. I love men. I want to be with men, and I'm only putting up with you because of the money," which somehow he got his greedy little mitts on after Jesus died. I don't understand why it didn't immediately pass to Pilar, but somehow he's got all the money. And then in the most like this scene, so they have this huge fight, right? And then he sits down, and I guess he's going through a moment of introspection. But then he confesses to having killed Jesus. There was a scene that had happened earlier where Jesus had woken up from his coma, and Enrique is standing over him, and he's like, "Oh my God." But then Enrique walks over to the blinds of the hospital room and shuts them. And then the next thing you know, Jesus is dead. So he confesses to killing his lover. And then the most insane part is Pilar turns around and she's like, "You did this for me. Oh my God, you did this for me." And at that point I was like, "Okay, both y'all can burn in hell."
I think we've reached the delirious part of this recording because we've spent so long watching this film, having our feelings while watching the film, and saying to each other, hold on to that thought, because we're going to talk about this. It's just the most nonsensical. Though I will say, Tim, the one bit you got backwards there is Pilar did have the money because he says
She
to her,
did.
yeah, because he says to her, okay, so hang on. He walks into the room, he's being cute, and she's like, "I don't think you really love me." And then he's like, "No shit, bitch. Like, you fucking came on to me and it was all this and yada yada, and I put up with you because you're fucking crazy." And that's
But
when
he's
she's like,
comfortable. But he says he wanted to stay in it because he was comfortable.
yeah, and
And
then
he loved it
that's when
well
she's like,
enough to be fine.
"Oh, you
But
only want to be with me because of the money."
well,
And
didn't he say, "I don't need the money, I have all the money"?
no, well, no,
I
actually, no, he
thought,
did say that. He did
yeah,
say
he did say that.
he want
So yeah,
money.
somehow he got the money,
No, no,
which
he
I'm
doesn't. Or either he's got his money or she's got her. I don't fucking know. But like, she's under the impression that he's only with her now because of money. But he's like, "No, but I've got money." And then he confesses to killing Jesus, which, to be clear here, she came back into all of this. She entered the plot because she was distraught about this man who she was married to being in a coma and then dying at some stage. And now she's confronted with his killer. And she's like, "You did that for me?" Like, just, I don't know. No.
And then
there's nobody in this film worth rooting for.
no, there
Ugh.
well, not nearly enough anyway. And in a very cheap, like low-hanging fruit kind of way, it's almost as if, oh, they're both awful, they're perfect for each other. But it's not believable the way
It's
this
a
works.
murderer and an accessory to a murderer.
Exactly. Anyway, we should finish recapping this
Um,
hot
oh
uh
god, yeah.
hot piece of film.
Yeah, which look, to be clear, everyone, we are very much nearly at the end. Thank the Christ for that. So, Nuria uploads the video of her parents having sex, because apparently she's decided now that everyone's unhappy and distraught that she's just going to do this. That video goes viral. Over time, both Andreas and Beatriz have watched the video, and it rekindles their interest in one another. Andreas moves back in, but we see at the very end, there's like a scene where they're like all out and having pizza or something. Like he's obviously still got a curiosity about who this other man is, because like there's like a random moment where like the guy brings over the food and Beatrice, I think, didn't she just like tap him on the tummy, just like or
I
even
feel like she rubbed his belly. Honestly, I feel like she rubbed his belly. Like I wasn't entirely sure, but I thought that's what I saw.
He was very
yeah.
friendly with the waiter at the restaurant, the mother of the family. Yes.
Yeah, in this film of confusing parables and nonsensical storylines, you know what? Plot twist? I couldn't keep track of what was going on. We're all now officially very confused because it is too difficult to keep track. And then he randomly like goes over and like yanks out a hair because he's gonna do the fucking DNA splicing thing at some stage, and then he just acts all chill again. Like, who fucking knows?
And then in the weirdest part that makes the least sense of all of this,
Oh, right, yeah. So Sophia is like once again back in her apartment, and Alex is there, and he's a vision because he's telling her that he died, and they've only just found his body. And then we see the ending of this film, which shows Sophia walking down the aisle to get married to Alex. I don't know what that's meant to be symbolic of. Like they're getting spirit married or some bullshit. I don't fucking know what that's about. And then we cut to because Abel is still like hooking up with Leonore, and then she basically says, "Go back to her. I'm sure she misses you." And that was that. And so he does, and then it's Abel and Paula with their baby Zoe in like a public pool looking happy. So I guess that's reached its zenith. And then in a separate moment, because at the very beginning of the film, Abel, who's a fit guy, stripped in front of all the fatties and is trying to be like, you're shedding all of your insecurities to be honest about who you are, which was weird, right? But then in this new group, he does that, and then everyone's like, "Ugh," like looks at him funnily, and then just like everyone walks out. And then he's just like stood there naked, just like smiling to himself. Like, I don't fucking know what that's about. Um, and then yeah, like I said, we saw what we saw with Andres, and then we never see Leonore again. Like, she was apparently only ever meant to be superfluous to the plot, so never fucking mind, I guess. Um,
oh, and one thing we didn't put here is that Enrique and Pilar get married in a civil union, right?
that's
At
right.
the courthouse.
You are right. They do get married in a little civil union moment. And then credits roll. Thank God. Um,
That
I don't.
was,
I hope everybody followed that. I really do.
yeah. And if you had trouble, trust, we did too. And we took notes. James took very detailed notes, and we're still trying to make sense of this very interesting narrative. But
yeah,
interesting facts about the film itself. The protagonist who plays Enrique Antonio de la Torre actively gained 50 kilos for the role and lost it. And many of the other actors who had the body transformations also gained and or lost weight. We listened to some interviews after watching the film, and Sophia mentions that she was bigger, but she lost weight doing the movie. And after the movie, she was talking about how it's a struggle to stay thin. I still want to eat hamburgers. Um, but it's an interesting touch and a unique one. You don't often see these sorts of production stunts happen where actors gain weight for a role anymore, although that was a big deal at the time in the early like 2000s, 2010s kind of era.
Yeah, there were a lot of actors that were doing like the gaining weight for roles at the time, and I guess they assumed it was going to make them an Oscar darling.
yeah.
And that seems to sort of be the central gimmick of this film, right? That, forget about the writing, forget about whether or not the plot is cohesive. These actors put on and lost weight for these roles.
Mm.
And that's when we were watching the interviews with the director and various members of the production, it's clear that that sort of was the big buzz surrounding this production. There wasn't really any sense of necessarily mocking fatness per se. Maybe a better way of explaining this is it's clear that the actors who put on the weight got to experience what it's like to be a bigger person. And the punchline itself wasn't necessarily the fact that they gained their weight, but it is indicative of the fact that this film, the author or the director, the writers have a point of view. And it's clear that this film sort of pathologizes fatness. It's in one of the interviews, the director says, I'm not sure whether fatness itself is a consequence or is a punishment, or if it's a consequence of some shortcomings. So it's clear that nothing. There's no positive view of being a larger person in this.
Yeah, I once again we come back to this thing that we unfortunately have encountered the most throughout this entire review series, which is just that anyone who is not fat, making something to do with fat, does not know what they're talking about, has no intention of even presenting like a balanced view on things. Like no even like passe attempt to be like, oh, well, in some instances, like, no, it's just always levied as this is terrible, this is the ridiculous scenarios that come about because you're all so fat. Like Andres as a inattentive father is because he's too busy focused on food and sex with his wife, apparently, to notice that his son's a psychopath. Sophia's too busy losing weight to notice that her partner's abusive. It's weird. It's weird the way it frames these characters as deserving, I think, a lot of the struggles that they find themselves in because of their size. Yeah.
And what I take away from all that is this was a film just full of contradictions, and people who contradicted themselves. 2 seconds after they said something before, it's like they said something, then they immediately went back on it. And if I can take particular issue with the queer character in this film, it just proves to me that this director has never met a queer person, because it was so sloppily written. And like, I think GLAAD would give, if there's a Razzie version, like if GLAAD gives out Razzie awards, this is going to get one.
Yes, GLAAD, please listen to the podcast and check out this film so that you can write a scathing review about how poorly written, poorly handled the queerness is in this narrative. Yeah, Tim, it's funny that you mentioned contradictions, because in the interviews we listened to with the director, he says, oh yeah, one of the recurring themes in this story is contradictions, to which he qualifies with nothing. He just likes contradictions, but there doesn't seem to be a greater narrative purpose. Furthermore, because he mentions that he doesn't like moralism and he doesn't like a moral to his stories or a message.
What's the Spanish word for bullshit?
I mean, well, we would say like mierda, but we don't always like put like bullshit together.
Oh,
like,
so what's the
mierda de
equivalent of saying?
Toro is like literal like shit of a bull.
So
we
what's the
shit.
equivalent? Like if you were to say bullshit like if you that's bullshit. Like what would you say?
Es mierda. Like that's shit.
Okay, well that's what this movie should have been titled. Yeah, that's what the title should have been.
Girl, das ist scheiße. This Spanish film is so bad, it made our Spanish-speaking guest not want to speak Spanish in calling it bullshit. She went to the German, so... I mean, I don't think we pulled anything else out from these interviews with the director or the actors. I mean, again, accolades to be given for not just one, but for several people really showing a commitment to character, to growth. I mean, I know we have a tendency to blame actors for not being able to do much with stuff, but y'all, the writing and directing in this was so bad, I would think it's far more likely that the actors did what they could with what they were given. So kudos to the bitches for making this.
Yeah, the actor's clearly committed to the material. That said, watching it, it's kind of an incoherent mess.
I
Yeah.
mean, and honestly, kudos to Antonio, the actor playing Enrique, because he did put on that weight and he looked good with a belly. I
Oh
mean,
my
like
God.
we were sitting there for the longest time in the scenes where Enrique is fat, and we were like, "That's got to be fat makeup," because they keep jumping back and forth between his skinny and fat self, and it's the same actor, and I'm like, there's no way that like, and then when we looked it up, we're like, oh no, he honestly did gain that weight. So I mean, he looked damn good.
Yeah, the one shining shot in the piece is very near the beginning when he decides that he's going to strip naked and join the others. And just the way in which he is so fantastically ball gutted, and he's actually got not a bad ass and set of thighs either. So you see a shot of the front, a shot of the back, and quite frankly, like if that was a guy on Grommr, your faggots would be fucking wanting to suck his dick. So like, if you just want to check out the first 15 minutes, if you can find it somewhere, you don't need to hear it in English because I promise you, you won't understand it in any language. Um, it's truly, it's
It's
quite,
incoherent in every way.
you
I
know,
love I love though how all of us, because it starts with Enrique being fat, and then you jump to the weight loss things. Without missing a beat, all of us were like, he looked better fat.
Well, I was gonna say, like, you might enjoy this film if you decided to get elevated or drunk. You might find it funny then.
It would have been more enjoyable. And I mean, at the risk of dying, you could make a drinking game of it to where every time you lose the plot, you take a shot. But I'm
Oh,
not
you'd be
trying to get,
fucked up in like 10 minutes.
yeah, we're not trying to give anybody alcohol poisoning or land you in the emergency room by any means.
you might be onto something there because I think what we should do is do a compilation of the most ridiculous ones, like Eater. I always come back to because y'all, if you don't remember this one, this was one of the short films where it was like it was cannibalism and then she was kidnapped and then she got obese in the worst fat suit. It was very clearly like a student film. It was terrible, girl. But we were so like overtired that we like circled all the way back around to maybe this is secretly good. It actually wasn't. But you know what? If it helps you to process, go off your tits. Right. Let's wrap this up with a couple of the key questions. What is the director's motivations for producing these films? Cap, I think you you said it best, where it's like it's the lens of the le God, I'm so done with this. I can't even remember what the fuck you said.
No,
What?
so like what this made me think of is like this is a style of film that was pretty popular in the late 90s, right? So this made me think of films like Cruel Intentions or American Beauty. And it's like this is the equivalent of a plastic bag drifting through the
Do you ever feel
Oh my God.
this director, it was clear from his interviews that he had a loose collection of themes that he wanted to portray, but he didn't really do much analysis.
Mm,
There's a lot of introduction of things like contradictions, religiosity, piousness, um, fat, homosexuality, and then they're all handled rather poorly.
mm.
Um, I don't know if it's more a reflection on the quality of Spanish film and media at the time or the greater state of cinematic writing at the time. Um, but as we've mentioned a few times, it's very, very, very hard to suspend disbelief at every single turn. Uh, when with that in mind, we thank you for joining us on this recap.
Absolutely. Normally we'd ask what do we like and dislike about the film, but I don't think there's any need for that at this current stage. I don't think we need to retouch on any of that. Um, Scores out of 10 peeps. What are we giving it?
I'm gonna give it a 4 just because that actor looked really good with the weight gain. And
Mm.
that's about the only redeeming quality this film had.
Yeah, I'd give it a 5 by virtue of the fact that, yeah, the actors actually committed to gaining and losing weight and to the material. It's very convincingly acted. Pity about the material itself, however.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, when we first sort of wrapped things up, I was thinking a very firm 2, but, listening to those interviews and knowing a little bit more about the work that went into it by the actors themselves, I do have to give it a true 4. I still think it has to miss the half mark because it's just not good. But no, the accolades must be given to the actors and performers. So listen, y'all, if you want to go and watch it, why? This is why we do this series, so that you don't fucking have to. To the director, if you're listening, why? Feel free to reach out to us at thecaptainbara@gmail.com if you have any further thoughts or feelings about the consequences of your actions in the years since this thing came out. But I think that's it. Cap, thank you so much for soldiering on with us this week. This has been a time.
Thanks so much for having me back on the pod, guys. You know, I was glad to be on here as your Spanish language consultant, but unfortunately, not even my knowledge of the Spanish language was able to help me comprehend this twisted narrative. But with that in mind, shall we sign off?
I think so. Where can our listeners find you online?
Yes, you can find me at thecaptainbara on Instagram. And you know, other places too if you're lucky. I'll let it be a treasure hunt because I like treasure hunts.
There you go. But that's it for another week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now, if you liked this episode for whatever reason, the podcast or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccymouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/thickradio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thethickradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats. Hallelujah.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Body by Cream.